Deputy.
Thank you, Las Cahirda. Firstly, Tánaiste, can I join with others in adding my voice to condemning what happened to you out in Jobestown last week. Despite our differences in this chamber amongst us all, I think we should all be on the one hymn sheet, every deputy of all parties and none, in condemning what happened out there, and hope that we don't see a repeat in the future. I've no doubt that you're breathing a sigh of relief after yesterday's massive climb down. And I note last night you said that you appointed Minister Kelly to sort this out. And I'm glad to see that Labour have now taken ownership of a Fine Gael love child that is Irish water, and that you have inflicted on the people yesterday. The next 8 years and everything collected by virtue of that package will go towards the 700 million that has been wasted to date. I wonder, did yesterday answer many outstanding questions? It failed, for example, to convince the Irish people that the setting up of Irish Water was the right thing to do. It failed in its efforts to convince the Irish people that suddenly we can expect Irish Water to be efficient, cost-conscious and consumer-friendly. And it did confirm, however, that one thing is off the agenda in relation to the model that you've pursued to date, and that is conservation is definitely off the agenda. But there's one question I want to ask Taoiseach, and I'm mindful of the commentary not only of Minister Varadkar the other night and Minister Howland yesterday, but the former ESRI chairman this morning is worried about the independence of Irish Water and its ability to reach the Holy Grail and borrow off balance sheet to the extent that you would want it. So what level of contact have you had with Eurostat? What reassurance have you received from them that your now revised model, with increased government subvention of 240 million, vis-à-vis the 180 that you're going to hand back in the rebates, and the 60 that you're going to supplement the local authorities with, rather than Irish Water paying the rates despite having taken ownership of the 11 billion worth of assets contained therein? So can you answer that question? And will it pass the test? Has it passed the test in the first instance? If it hasn't, what assurances have you had? And what guarantees have you that it will pass the test? And I think then the House might be the wiser, despite the fact, as I said, you've revised the model in relation to government subvention has increased, the public's input has decreased. You feel that that does a bit more than put the rest of the House on a general election footing, because that appears all it does.
Thank you, Deputy. Tánaiste.
Thank you very much, Deputy Cowan, for your very kind remarks. I have to say I've received a huge amount of contact from people right around the country, and indeed Irish people abroad, and I just want to express my thanks to everybody. As I say, it wasn't particularly about me, it was about the 60 graduates. The community and Uncle Son were very proud of them. The people who were leading this protest seemed to have no care for them. And in relation to the people of Tallaght and Jobestown in particular, I was at a very big schools event the other day that involved schools from Jobestown and from Tallaght generally. The students, second years, they were so proud, so well turned out. They're young people who hope one day to go to Trinity College under the Access programme, or to some of our other universities and colleges, and you couldn't not be proud of them. And all I can say is the protesters and the people leading the protests did them no favours. Just turning to Irish Water then. Well, if Irish Water is Fine Gael's love child, Deputy, as you described it, I have to say, I think Fianna Fáil had a hand in its conception, because you actually left. You left.
Please.
You left. You know.
Please.
And we all understand.
Okay,
we all understand, Deputy, the pressure that the then government was under, but it was left on the list, the to-do list that you signed off with on the Troika. But as I said, I don't really want to get into an argy-bargy with you, and I want to thank you in relation to your remarks, because it is very comforting, particularly in relation to my staff person who was with me in the car, who had a very frightening experience and you know, was understandably extremely upset, and the grief that the guards took, particularly the women Gardaí, this over-sexualised imagery that was being used in the protests, and the kind of the comments that were made as well, particularly to the young male Garda. In relation then to Irish Water, just let me say this. You asked about the you asked about the status of Eurostat. Eurostat is like our CSO. And these are very augustly independent organisations, as any economist, and in fact anybody who has served in government will tell you. They make their own decisions. For instance, the CSO publish regular figures in Ireland in respect of economic activity, employment figures, unemployment figures, and so on. All of these statistical bodies are resolutely independent. So there is no way that the Irish government will know the decision until such time, in their own professional way, under EU law, and indeed the CSO under Irish law, will take the decisions sometime, I understand, in the first quarter, the end of the first quarter of the year. The government, in the material, the market corporation test, the so-called MCT test, the government subvention as a percentage of the total is 44%. There's a small change in the subvention level as the CEO of Arvia and Irish Water set out on prime time last night. It changes by about 21 million in relation to the rates which would formerly have potentially been paid by Irish Water. Remember that the property and assets which were taken over are the property and assets of the local authorities, and as such never paid rates. So an arrangement has essentially been made to continue that. The CEO said it made no material difference. But the difference this funding model does make, and I know, Deputy, that you appreciate it, is that instead of having the funding costs of Irish Water directly in our annual capital budgets, we can use the ESB and the Bord Gáis model to raise the funds via the selling of debt and bonds, largely, by the way, Deputy, to pension funds of workers working throughout the world, in the European Union, in Ireland, when their pension funds choose to invest in a public utility such as Irish Water.
Thank you, Tánaiste.
And essentially, it's a way of making the investment capacity of Ireland go further. We've done it for decades and raised billions via the ESB. We've raised billions as well via Bord Gáis, and we're simply using the same model. And if using that model means we've more money, Deputy, to put into schools, school building, hospitals, roads, and all the other things that understandably everybody in this House is looking for nationally and at a local level.
Come out. Deputy Cowan, the supplementary question.
Thank you, Tánaiste Joan. Bottom line, Tánaiste, that I gather from your response is that yesterday's package, the revised model, has not passed the market test. It hasn't. And that being the case, whether it will or it won't remains to be seen. And all I want to know, on behalf of those that I represent, and I think the people are entitled to know, in the event of it not passing that test, what is Plan B? And I suppose it's not Plan B, considering you've had 10 U-turns since this debacle commenced. Exactly, we're past the middle of the alphabet almost. So could you tell me, please, in the absence, if it's not passed, considering it hasn't yet been passed, what's Plan B? What do you do? Do we go back to the model we had beforehand? Do we go back to the regulator's price rather than what you brought forward yesterday?
Come out, Tánaiste.
Well, you know, Deputy, can I just use the example of tests in life? Almost all of us here at one time or another have sat the NCT test, or our cars have. Lots of us have sat the Leaving Cert and other exams. Now, you're asking me to predict the outcome of the test. You're asking me to predict the outcome of the test run by an independent body, and it is absolutely independent. Both the CSO and Eurostat. The CSO is the Irish equivalent of Eurostat for calculating statistics in Ireland, and Eurostat are absolutely independent. If you recall, Deputy McGrath, which I'm sure you do, when Greece actually got into serious difficulties in particularly the May to June of 2011. One of their big problems was that Eurostat decided that they did not have full confidence in their figures. Now, Eurostat are absolutely independent. If you wish them not to be independent, and I don't think I know you're not suggesting that, but you're asking for the answer to a test that will not, as it were, be taken by them until they decide to do it. We anticipate that they will carry out that test and examination sometime next April, sometime around the end of the first quarter. But we're very confident because we have the figures here, and the government subvention, can I just to help some of the members of the House, the test is whether or not there is a stream of income in excess of 50% of the total funding which comes from funding other than government funding. And the government subvention in terms of Irish Water, Airvia, is 44%. So we more than comfortably pass the test, and I am satisfied that we will actually pass the test.
Thank you, Tánaiste. Now call Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald. Sorry, please. Shh. Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald. Please. Order.
Tánaiste says I join in absolutely rejecting any act of aggression against you or your staff member or any member of An Garda Síochána or indeed any protester. I'm sure you'll join with me in acknowledging that, in fact, the protests of hundreds of thousands of people, the length and breadth of the country, have been marked by their peacefulness, their respect, their colour, their determination, and that I'm sure you will join with me in saying that the acts of a few random individuals do not represent the spirit or the intent of the vast number of people who have protested. And Tánaiste, yesterday your government announced a revised plan cobbled together in response to those very demonstrations. It's an attempt to dupe people into believing that the issue of water charges has been resolved. It is, I believe, a desperate attempt to bribe people off the protests that have demonstrated the sharp reality that this lame duck coalition has lost its mandate. And you seem to have a very strange view of the public's anger and demands. Mind-bogglingly, you persist with the farcical line that people had been protesting for certainty and clarity. That's nonsense, Tánaiste, and you know it. There are 4 things that hard-pressed ordinary people can be certain of today. Firstly, that your government is pressing ahead with water charges. Secondly, that these charges will go in only one direction, and that is up. Thirdly, that the metering programme will continue and that metered charges are the end game here. And fourthly, that there is still no constitutional guarantee of a right to water. You made a big deal of the €100 rebate that will be administered through your department. And you seem absolutely incapable of just getting it. There are many, many families, Tánaiste, who cannot pay any charge whatsoever. Easy payment plans and other methods of extracting this money simply don't cut it. And they can't wait, Tánaiste, 6 months to get €100 back. They don't have €100 to give. People, as you know, didn't march looking for capped charges or flat charges or for threats of penalties. They didn't march to have their landlords turned into water tax collectors or to have unpaid charges attached to their family home. They didn't march for concessions, they marched for abolition. So, Tánaiste, it seems that you've answered the questions that you weren't asked, and yet you failed to answer the core demand made by people the length and breadth of the country.
Put your question,
what will it take for you, Tánaiste, to wake up and to listen to what people are actually saying and to finally scrap these odious and unfair water charges?
Tánaiste.
Well, first of all, again, Deputy, I want to thank you for your comments, and I really do hope that people like yourself in positions of leadership in particular will remove the slur cast on the people of Jobestown and Tallaght broadly by the way the leaders of the demonstration conducted themselves. I think that the people of Tallaght and Jobestown are owed an apology, and I want to thank Deputy MacDonald from disassociating herself from the kind of behaviour which was extremely damaging to the reputation of the you know, the people in Jobestown and Tallaght go out and work hard to earn their money and they pay their taxes. They do not deserve to be traduced in the way that was done by the organisers of the protest. And their children have ambitions to go on and work and go to college and not to have the name of Tallaght brought down or the name of any working class community in Dublin traduced.
Let's hear the answer, please.
You seemed pretty happy to have the guards bring you out of the demonstration and take you away safely when it got rougher. I presume at that point you put the megaphone back in the boot of your car.
Please, please, no.
But I want to go back to Deputy MacDonald.
Okay.
I want to go back to Deputy MacDonald.
Deputy MacDonald's question.
Just want
please,
to
could we have order, please, for the answer to the question?
I know this is taking a bit of extra time. I want to thank Deputy MacDonald for disassociating herself and her party from what happened in Tallaght on Saturday. It's not good for anybody in Ireland, and it's not good for that particular community. You know, it's not about me, it's about the community in Tallaght, it's about the community in Jobestown. Can I just say then, in relation to her comments, and her question, under the revised package of a fresh start for Irish Water, people who are in a single adult household will pay a charge net which will be €1.15 a week, and people in a household with 2 adults or more will pay a charge net of €3 a week. Now, you speculated why people were marching. I know lots of people, Deputy, who marched, and I've talked to a lot of people about the issue. People actually want, as well as the things you were talking about, let me put this to you, people actually want clean water. They want an end to the spectacle of 42 of our rivers having raw sewage dumped into them. They want actually to see a programme. And I have to say, I would have thought this
Deputy.
is something that...
Deputy,
this is
sorry, Deputy MacDonald's question, please.
This is the alliance of the Tea Party and the Trotskyists. This is the new political party in Ireland. The Tea Party Trotskyists,
Please.
a homegrown Irish version.
Sorry, let's get back to the question, please.
Yeah. What we...
All right. Tánaiste, look, it's Deputy MacDonald's question. This is leaders' questions, please. And Deputy MacDonald had a question Tánaiste is answering, and time is nearly up now.
Yes. Can I just say, in reference to what Deputy Donnelly is saying, he knows and I know that there, and to you, Deputy MacDonald, there has been an intense amount of investment, particularly under the previous government. Fianna Fáil put a lot of investment, as did local authorities around the country through development levies, into our water delivery and our sewerage systems. But having having boundaries in relation to pipes that stop at the county boundary makes no sense. Just as a country, we made no sense. We actually had no great achievement in relation to the roads programme, and I will acknowledge this in relation to Fianna Fáil. When the National Roads Authority brought the previously disassociated County Roads Investment Plan together, we actually got one of the better legacies of the prosperous years, a motorway system that vastly improved the service and the usability of our road system.
Thank you, Tánaiste.
Can I just say this as well? Anyone who ever turned left at Paulstown to go to Waterford will remember, I'm looking at Deputy Ciara, and all I can say is if you travelled that road, as I did over a long period, when you turned left and you went into South Kilkenny, the road went back to being the roads of earlier days. Why? Because Kilkenny County Council didn't care about how people got to or from Waterford. When Fianna Fáil, in fairness, the previous government invested into a national roadways authority, we got a motorway which the people of Waterford deserved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor MacDonald, supplementary question. Could we order, please? Order. Deputy MacDonald.
Well, Tánaiste, just as I disassociate myself from that behaviour, I equally disassociate myself from the behaviour of a very small number of An Garda Síochána who have been extremely heavy-handed, extremely rough with protesters. And I don't think there is a place...
Deputy O'Donovan, please. No, there's only 2 minutes for
the Gardaí are not anybody's enemy. They're the guardians of the peace, and protesters have a perfect right to be treated lawfully, respectfully, and not to be flung against a bollard by a member. It is a very limited number, but I think we need to be consistent in this view that all protesting, all demonstration needs to be absolutely peaceful and peacefully policed. Can I also say, Tánaiste, that far from casting a slur on the people of Jobestown or Tallaght in general, that certainly for my part and for anyone else that I know in this Oireachtas, there would only be words of positivity for Tallaght. There's no need for anyone to stand up and make a grand defence of the people of Tallaght. There's no attack on the people of Tallaght. The people of Tallaght are fine people. The people of Jobestown are fine people. And by the way, have as much right as anybody else to protest in respect of water charges. To get back to my core point.
Question, please, Deputy.
I don't need, you see, to speculate around what people want or what they were saying on the demonstrations. I was on those demonstrations myself. And you very glibly, Tánaiste, say it's only €1.15 a week. It's only €3 a week. Well, of course it is, if you have those euros in your pocket. You just don't seem to grasp, and I'm very troubled by this, particularly since you reference working class communities in particular across this city and beyond. You don't seem to grasp that there are people now with their current bills, never mind a water charge, who don't have any euros, any cents at the end of any given week or month. They can't pay. So can I ask you 2 specific questions, Tánaiste, and you might give me 2 specific answers. What about the can't pays? And they're out there, and some of them are the working poor. We all know them, so let's not pretend that they don't exist. What about the can't pays under your plan? What do they face? Penalties? Attachments to dwellings? What do you say to them? And secondly, you considered everything were advised for this package of measures that you announced yesterday. What consideration was given to abolishing domestic water charges? That was the demand. That is the demand. Did you even have a discussion or consider the demand that has been made by so many people?
First of all, again, I'll ask Ceann Comhairle, and this may take slightly longer. I feel, first of all, in relation to your comments, in relation to, Deputy MacDonald made some important comments about An Garda Síochána, and I'd like just to be able to address those briefly, if I may. I'll ask Ceann Comhairle. First of all, at these protests, by a small minority of people, I think you know who some of them are. They're from a variety of groups. The virulence of the language directed towards the Gardaí and towards the people against whom they're protesting, and this has happened not just to me but to other colleagues and other people. The virulence of the language, Deputy, is actually, I think, extraordinary. Now, these are our fellow Irish citizens, and the Garda Síochána are tasked with guarding everybody in this state, and they do a very good job under difficult circumstances, as they did in Tallaght on Saturday. But the provocative nature of the language, the sexed-up nature of the language, the imagery in the language relating to women. There were women band Gardaí there who were fantastic and who managed to stop further assaults on the car that I was in. I was in 2 cars at different times. The imagery and the language that were used by the protesters, and the language and the homophobic and the bullying language that was used to the young male Gardaí. I actually, and you know, I've travelled around the world, Deputy. I've been in difficult circumstances on different occasions. You know, I was brought up in the centre of Dublin in a very ordinary working class community, and I'm no stranger to people having robust language. But the imagery in the language that's used, I don't know what is in these people's minds. But for the Gardaí, the young Gardaí, to have to take it is not healthy.
Thank you,
I will say that, and I just want to say that. If, on the other hand, Deputy, you're aware, as the Deputy Leader of your party, of where you feel the Gardaí may have reacted inappropriately or behaved inappropriately, or other people are aware of that, we have established by the previous government, we have GSOC. And if you have a complaint, or people that you're aware of have a complaint, that's the place to take it to. Yeah. But I just want to say that what was being done or attempted to be done to the Gardaí, the damage that was done, one of the cars, by the way, the second car that I was in, just so you know, had its windscreen broken, Sorry, I asked the last Ceann Comhairle for his indulgence.
Thank you, Tánaiste. I'm sorry, I have to go on.
The second,
I have to go on to the next
second point.
Please. Oh, please. No, sorry.
Can I just say this, Ceann Comhairle?
Is this a point of order?
I appreciate...
Please. Sorry. I have to go on to the next questioner, so please, Deputy. Sorry.
I appreciate that the Tánaiste wish to make comments on events at the weekend, but I think you've covered that very comprehensively. I've asked you 2 questions. What about the can't pays?
Okay, all right.
And what about the abolition of charges? And I want answers to those questions.
Please. No, sorry. It's leaders' questions. It's leaders' questions now. Just please, Tánaiste, to address those questions. Yeah.
Deputy MacDonald, in relation to people who have inadequate resources, whether they're at work or whether they're depending on social welfare, for the first time since the economy collapsed, we were actually in a position this year to have a small, modest social welfare increase targeted at precisely the people that you rightly express concern about. Secondly, if there are families or individuals who have particular needs. As always, the Department of Social Protection will seek, as we have done in relation to people who have had ESB deaths and Bord Gáis deaths, to actually set in process a mechanism to support them in relation to meeting their obligations. The social welfare system has done this for decades, and if there are cases where families or individuals have a particular difficulty, we have been there to actually help such individuals and such families down the decades, and the department will do that again.
Thank you,
but just let me say, the increases for somebody on the average industrial wage in terms of tax will be €8 in terms of tax saving, increasing their take-home pay. For somebody on about 34,000 will be €8 a week from January or February, whenever their employer puts the tax changes into effect, as compared with €1.15 or €3 a week.
Thank you, Tánaiste. Now, for the technical group, please. Deputy Joan Collins.
Can I just put the record?
Deputy, I have great time for independence.
Can I just?
I have great time for independence. Deputy Collins.
Can I?
We've order for Deputy Collins, please.
Can I just put the record? It's taken a half an hour for two leaders' questions. It was only supposed to take 15 minutes. I want to raise the issue, a serious issue of the negotiations, very secret negotiations that have been taking place between the European Union and the US. These talks are aimed to conclude a transatlantic trade and investment partnership. Most people don't even know these negotiations are underway and have no idea what has been discussed. Because there's extreme secrecy surrounding the talks, there's been no debate, or very little debate in the European Parliament, and no debate that I know of in this Parliament. There are huge concerns with this within trade unions and civil society groups. War on Want described TTIP as the assault on European and US societies by transnational corporations. The primary aim of TTIP, acknowledged by officials in the talks, is not to stimulate trade by removing tariffs. It is to remove regulatory barriers which restrict potential profits by transnational corporations. 6 main areas. 1, to create new markets by opening up public services, government procurement competition. Will this include Irish Water, Tánaiste? 2, the convergence on standards on food safety and the environment, which will mean a lowering of EU standards. In the US, 70% of processed foods contain GM. The environment in the EU, you must prove a substance is non-toxic. In the US, you can use unless proven toxic. Banking regulation is on the agenda, tougher in the US after the actions of after the crash, and the EU banks want lighter regulation, and it's back to business as usual. Other issues are easing data protection, likelihood of job losses in the EU to the US due to lower union organisation and labour laws, and very important, the issue of investor-state dispute settlement, an investor-state dispute settlement court, which is a private, secret court. Can I ask you, Tánaiste, what level of involvement have Irish officials in these talks? If there has been, who were they? Has there been any discussion in Cabinet about these talks? Will there be a debate here with full information provided to the deputies?
Thank you, Deputy. Tánaiste.
The Deputy is referring to the ongoing discussions between the European Union and the United States in relation to trade. As you probably know, Deputy, we're a trading island. We have to make our living in the world, and any negotiations that provide markets for Irish goods and services are of significant importance to developing and sustaining employment in Ireland. So in that sense, if you can get fair trade regulations, which I think is what you're talking about, that take into account the interests of the different people in the different countries involved in such negotiations, then that is actually a very important advance. You'll know, for instance, that in recent times, in the consequence of the difficulties in the Ukraine, that in fact certain parts of the Russian markets have been closed to Irish exporters, and that's been of concern to people working in companies that export, for instance, to to Russia. So if you have a close down in relation to trade access for a country like Ireland, that would be incredibly difficult. Are there concerns in relation to trade negotiations? There always are concerns in relation to trade negotiations, because what you have to do, Deputy, is to balance. What you have to do is to balance the interests of this country as a trading country and the positive benefits that come from having bigger markets for our goods and services, as against any additional opening of markets or changes in market regulation that could adversely affect us or indeed workers' interests in this country. In that context, the member of the government or the members of the government who would be involved in this particularly would obviously be the Minister for Foreign Affairs, and I know that my predecessor, Deputy Eamon Gilmore, took an extremely strong interest, particularly in the rights elements of these negotiations, and these, I know, have been raised by a number of trade unions. I'm not directly involved in these negotiations as Minister for Social Protection, but as I said, we have to look to Ireland developing markets and developing trade. That's actually how we make our living, drawing in international investment into Ireland. We had a very good announcement in my own constituency last week of an extra 1,000 construction jobs in terms of developing medical, biological facilities at the cutting edge of medical advances and so on. But we do also have to be aware of difficulties which there could be or downsides to any of these negotiations, and that's what the Minister for Foreign Affairs is tasked to do.
Deputy Joan Collins.
Tánaiste, I wasn't expecting that reply. The serious concerns have been raised about TTIP by civil groups, by trade unions, in relation to workers' rights laws and the challenges that these multinationals seem to be trying to give themselves the power to challenge governments, national governments' rights to defend whatever they can. I'll give you an example. In Canada, in the fracking situation, the Canadian government said they didn't want it. They want to have a moratorium for 2 years in relation to a company looking for fracking rights. That company has brought the Canadian government to court in relation to this. This TTIP is trying to procure a situation where the multinationals have all rights to protect their profits. That's this key thing this is all about. And there has to be serious debate in this country. And obviously you don't know too much about it. I don't know a hell of a lot about it neither, but I'll say that in here. And I want to find out more information about it. But it should be debated in this style, in this chamber in relation to it. And the people of this country should know about it. And I hope the media pick this up now, the TTIP, that they'll be able to investigate what's going on here. And I'll just give you another example. In Germany, a Swedish...
Stop.
In Germany,
Deputy Burton, please. Deputy Burton. In
Germany, a Swedish energy company is suing the German state because of the decision to phase out nuclear power following the disaster in Japan. This is the type of information, this is the type of detail that this TTIP is allowing transnational companies to bring in. This has to be challenged. We have to know what we're talking about, and I'd like to see you coming back in here and saying this should be an item on the agenda. And has Eamon Gilmore brought all this information to Cabinet in relation to this?
Thank you. Final reply, Tánaiste.
Well, first of all, the European Union Committee and Deputy Eric Byrne and indeed Deputy Dominic Hannigan are very active members of it. They have held, Deputy, I don't know if you had the opportunity to attend, a series of debates, and they've submitted their views to the EU Commission. The issues that you're raising are very important issues. I acknowledge that. I think that you should put down, but you possibly have already put down questions both to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, but what might be appropriate, and I'm sure the committee will be open to to it is to have some further discussions in the committee to go into the details of the precise situations that you've raised. And I think that would be the best way of addressing it, and perhaps to have a detailed debate in the committee and invite in people with particular expertise in relation to these trade areas.
So, go out, Tánaiste, that concludes